Hello, Writers Guild members and fans of great television writing. Thank you for coming tonight. It's great to see you all. If you had any friends who couldn't make it tonight, we are also recording this for our website. Welcome to And the Nominees Are TV Streaming Contenders, presented by the Writers Guild of America East and our media partner, Vulture. I'm Dana Weissman, Director of Programs at the Writers Guild of America East. The Writers Guild Awards will take place on March 5th, which is a couple of Sundays from now, at the Edison Ballroom in New York City, and there's also a concurrent ceremony in Los Angeles. I'd like to thank the team at the SVA Theater here, Rebecca Schwartz, Amanda Dong, Michael Klein, and Vidya Alexander Martinez for hosting us tonight and being such pleasures to work with. I'd also like to thank our terrific partners at Vulture, especially Jamie McFarlane and tonight's moderator, Kathryn VanArendonk. Most importantly, I'd like to thank our panelists tonight for taking time out of their busy schedules to share their experiences and writing philosophies with the writing community here in New York City. We're going to hear from them in just a moment, after which we'll have time to take questions from the audience. When that time comes, please remember that we're looking for questions and maybe some comments, but certainly no pitches or loglines. Now, please join me in welcoming Vulture critic Kathryn VanArendonk.
Hello. I am just beyond thrilled to be here tonight. As you can see, we have this incredible panel of people. They asked me if I wanted to do this, and I said sure, and then they told me who the people were, and I was like, sure. So I'm sure you are as happy as I am to be here. Let me introduce them to you. We have Tony Gilroy, who has been nominated for ANDOR. Antonio Campos has been nominated for The Staircase. Taffy Brodesser-Akner for Fleischman is in Trouble. Madeleine George for Only Murders in the Building. And Daniel Goldfarb for Julia. So I wanted to start by asking all of you, and maybe I'll start just with Daniel because you're right here. What TV were you obsessed with when you were growing up?
Okay, I got the microphone. I was obsessed as a little kid.
Why? Yes, because at some point you start to write television, and the models that you have are the things that you started with, I find.
I loved Cheers.
Yes.
Cheers was probably my favorite show as a kid, and as a teenager, I sort of grew into it and realized it was even more sophisticated and funny than I thought it was. I loved LA Law. I loved Family Ties. I loved Soap.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I watched reruns of Soap. I still hum the theme song of Soap in my head walking down the streets of New York. And then when I got to college, The Sopranos went on television, and then, I fell in love with all of those premium shows. But those were the shows I loved as a kid.
Does anyone else want to shout out some favorite childhood things that...
Twin Peaks.
Yes.
That was a game changer for me. I remember. I mean, I was younger, but it was the energy in the house when Twin Peaks was coming on was palpable. You knew you were in for something strange and haunting, and I didn't understand the show, but I felt the show in such a visceral way, and it always stayed with me. And the fact that you could do something like that on TV was really exciting, and I didn't fully understand it at that time, but later on I realized how powerful it was and how impactful it was for me.
Taffy?
I watched a lot of 30-something. I was raised in an Orthodox house, and I was not allowed to watch much, but I would sneak into the basement and watch 30-something so I would know how to be an adult a non-Orthodox adult once it was time. And also I did the same, for the same reason I did A Different World, which is because college was gonna come before my yuppie 30-somethingness. And then I loved sitcoms, and I loved, as I grew older, I loved Sex and the City, and then I wasn't a child anymore.
Madeleine?
I grew up in a house that was very contemptuous of television, and we had this tiny little black and white TV, and it only got PBS and ABC, and in order to get the ABC, you had to hold the antenna. And but I felt like there was something in there that I really wanted. And Thursday night TV on ABC, like I could recite for you Growing Pains and Who's the Boss. Like, still to this day, I can't come near Judith Light. Like, I have a full breakdown. But then when I went away, actually when I finally sort of like grew up and moved to New York City on my own, and then discovered like syndicated sitcoms, I was like, what is this that's been kept from me? And then like I collected them kind of slightly insanely. Like I would videotape news radio when it came on at 11 and 11:30 every night in syndication, and I had these VHS tapes with this very meticulous descriptions of the episodes on them. I watched them over and over again. And yeah.
Tony?
Oh man, I mean, I'll just ruin the whole conversation. My brothers and I'll tell you what I remember. My brothers and I, we still work together, right? So we're even all on this show. Destination TV for us, we watched a lot of TV. And we had 3 channels, right? Back in the day, 3 channels. That was it. And they came in sporadically. But Destination TV, probably the thing that we would get together and absolutely watch together, the Wild Wild West. Man, that show we were like all in for that. So Man from U.N.C.L.E., Wild Wild West, that's our era. I mean, all that stuff. And, Mary Tyler Moore, comes in there then as well. That was all, that moment, but Wild Wild West. Yeah. Most jacked up, weird, what's going on, wow. All the trippy stuff that was in there, that was very exciting for prepubescent, upstate weird kids.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by what TV shaped people when they were little, in part because I think we all know TV has changed so much. Just in the last decade, it has become this wildly strange other thing. It's very different from 3 channels, which is not to say that Twin Peaks was not its own incredibly strange thing, but felt like it was strange against something rather than part of this vast landscape. And I'm curious, I wanted to ask all of you, but maybe I'll start with Taffy. When you sort of were pitching the show, you knew you were adapting your own book. Is there a TV show? Is there like a model? Do you know, or you're thinking like it's gonna be this kind of show? Or how do you even begin to imagine what a TV show is in 2023? Because it used to be very clear and I think is not necessarily now.
I think it's very unclear. And if I had that question in my mind, I don't think I could have done it. All I knew was that it was a book people were interested in, and I knew the book. So all I had to
wrote it.
Because I wrote it. And all I had to do was cut it up, make it interesting, try to compel talented people to play the parts. But I did not, when I published the book, I did not think it was adaptable, and I didn't think about those things. But I had other people in television who were asking to help adapt it, who were more experienced than I was. So I was very lucky, and I said yes because how could you not say yes? And also, I'm a journalist, and the money in television is so much better. Yeah. It's just so much better.
Sure. But it's still, there is then this question, like, it is not, cutting up the book is not exactly how a TV show is made.
But that's what I was thinking.
Okay,
sure. So when I made the show, so there was this impetus to, it's a very strange book, right? It turns on itself toward the end. The main character shifts throughout, but you have to make something interesting enough at the beginning so that people will stay for you to make your point. And at first, because of that problem, I wanted to make it into a movie. But a movie, there's no amount of time in a movie that's long enough to kind of commit to the bit of it. And so we needed like 5-6 episodes of this is the story before we flipped it. Like, we needed to keep a straight face over it. And I had people, Sarah Timberman and Susanna Grant, my producing partners, who just know how to do this and made sure that every episode had a theme and was about something while keeping a careful watch over an arc. But when the decisions were hard, the answer was always in the book. Like, you can always say that there were people who read this book and liked it, and I should not deviate wildly from it. And the rest were my producing partner's notes, sometimes the studio and network notes. But it was hard because people would say during the pitching process, what is this going to be like? And I know from being like a scrappy journalist that the answer is always, it's so obnoxious, but I'm gonna tell you the truth. It's not gonna be like anything you've ever seen, because I don't have an answer. And then they'd say, you mean like Fleabag? And I'd say, yeah, but not Fleabag. And people, I found when I was pitching as a freelance journalist, that all they want is your confidence. And so, I don't know, it worked here too. So, free tip. It's like nothing you've ever seen.
Yeah, so one of the things that you mentioned is this, the confidence, but also the tension that comes when you're working with adaptation. All of you, in some way, I think Madeleine maybe least are working from a specific adapted text, but even Only Murders in the Building, right, is pulled from all these different sort of pop cultural bits and pieces. And I'm so curious about how you think about Only Murders' relationship with all the other sort of texts that are floating around in it. Do you think of it like, is it sewn together from little bits, or is it just sort of a wacky world where podcasts also exist? The order of how you imagine the show.
I mean, first of all, let me just say, I'm not Steve Martin, nor am I John Hoffman, the co-creators of the show. I'm a person that's been on the writing staff for 3 seasons and is deeply involved in it. But in terms of their sense of whether or not it's specifically speaking back to Serial, for example, or other true crime phenomena that have taken the nation by storm, I sort of leave to them. I think that we love to play against those phenomena, and I think there's a pretty naked Serial rip-off in our show. But it's not. But I think that there are people up here who have much more sort of frank relationships to adaptation than we do. I mean, I think we're sort of more about like trying to ride the wave of a cultural, like a zeitgeist moment.
One of them obviously would be The Staircase, which is an adaptation of a true crime, but it is sort of fictionalized, sort of. This is another one of like, how do you imagine this show? How do you sort of talk to people about what the show is going to be?
I mean, pitching the show was a nightmare because the pitch went on forever.
It's like something you've ever seen.
Yeah, something you've seen. Like, you mean the show that 100 million people saw on Netflix? Exactly, but it won't be anything like that, which is what the pitch was, which was like, look, because it was like, well, it was, because, look, I started this process of working on trying to adapt this in 2008 as a movie, and I spent about 5 years or so trying to adapt it as a movie. I wrote it as a feature a few times at Fox Searchlight. And over the course of doing that, the story itself started to change because all of a sudden, he got out, and all of a sudden he was, his relationship with the editor was developing, and then they broke up. So it was like, oh, okay. So like this, none of this can fit into it. This whole thing, this story, if you tell it properly, can fit into a movie. And I knew that the movie, and then eventually the series, was nothing like the documentary. Obviously there was the trial, and that was based on the trial. But what it was pulling from the documentary was more the way the documentary was made, and just storytelling, like the storytelling that went into making the documentary, the decisions that went into telling that story, and the storytelling on the defense's part, and the storytelling on the prosecution's part. And so there was, in my mind, this show wasn't like the documentary, but in pitching it, I had to assume that these executives hadn't seen the documentary, so I had to tell them the whole story, which was so, which took forever. I mean, and then now that I'm here and I can say this without like feeling awful about it, there was one pitch where an executive was sleeping, started to fall asleep, which I then have told other writers, and like, well, that can happen. And I was like, that was, and I just started pitching harder. I was like, kind of like, and then, just seeing if I could wake them up. But I knew that, I just had, again, kind of like what you're saying, Taffy, I had the confidence going in the room that this wasn't going to be like the documentary, and when I started to tell them the things behind the documentary, they would perk up. And that's why I got involved, too. Someone said to me, the producer that originally sent me the documentary said, there's 3 things you should know. 1, there's more to the story than is in the documentary. 2, the director and producer don't agree about whether or not he did it. And 3, the editor is in a relationship with Michael Peterson, and she didn't meet him until after she finished editing the documentary and he was in prison. And so I said, okay, well, there you go. That's a story. And so, that wasn't the documentary,
Yeah.
I just want to say there is some funny game of chicken when you're pitching something based on IP, and you have to do this dance where you have to pretend that they read it for their sake,
Right.
because they're pretending,
Right.
but you're just trying to suss out, did they?
Right.
How much do I tell? And like, how much do I, yeah.
Daniel, did you have to sort of make them pretend that they knew who Julia Child was, or did everyone know?
I mean, the pitching process for Julia was the opposite. I went in feeling really confident, and then I lost all my confidence. Three Arts came up with the idea of doing a show about Julia Child, and they were meeting with writers, and I came in, and I was working on Mrs. Maisel, which is, I think, why I was submitted for it. But I love food. I don't know a ton about Julia. I know a little bit about Julia. My mother is a cookbook writer, so she has the cookbooks. But we didn't watch The French Chef or anything when I watched Cheers. I didn't watch The French Chef. And Three Arts. So anyway, so I sort of pitched it as the invention of the modern marriage. That's what the show is about. That it starts off as an old-fashioned 1950s idea of a marriage, and by the end of the season, at least, it becomes a modern marriage. And as well as it being about, the birth of public television and what it is to be a television celebrity, and the women's movement and food culture, and Lionsgate, who owns 49% of Three Arts, we had to take it to them. And they said, because it has no plot, basically, you should write the pilot. So I wrote the pilot, and everyone loved the pilot. And everyone got very excited that we were going to go in and pitch it and leave the pilot, and there was going to be this war for it. And that did not happen. And it was very hard to pitch the show without giving away the pilot. It was just the wrong order to do it in, at least for us. And people passed on it and said, it's beautifully written, and it's funny, and it's warm, and it's about things, but it doesn't have enough of an engine. So Chris Kaiser, my partner, and we came up with this crazy subplot. And for our final pitches, we sent them the pilot before we pitched it, as opposed to leaving it after. So they had read it, and then we could come in and talk about the rest of the season. And we pitched all of this crazy melodrama, and it worked. And then people wanted it. And so we after 6 passes, we changed course with our last 2, and our last 2 both wanted it. So I really learned something in that experience. And then the irony is, every time we put in this melodrama, they would say, it's too early in the season. Do it the next episode. Do it the next episode. And then finally, episode 7, Sarah Aubrey, our executive at HBO Max, said, you know, you guys have done a good job making these small problems feel like big problems for these characters. We don't think we need it. And Erwin Stoff, who's one of the 3 Arts partners, who was on the Zoom, called me and he was like, after all of this, you actually got to make the show that you wanted to make originally, which almost never happens. So I got very lucky, but we had to jump through all these hoops to make the story feel noisier, only to let it be a quiet show.
Wait, but I want to know what the melodrama was.
Well, we're doing it in season 2. So I can't really give it away. Or we're doing like a gentle version of it. But it has to do with their past in the OSS.
Oh, okay.
Their time. I mean,
Yes,
what was
right.
fun about Julia is we did a lot of research, but it is not a biopic. It is more of a fable, drawing from facts and drawing from reading between the lines. We always said we're doing the Amadeus version of Julia Child. So everything that we dramatize, we think could have happened, but we just don't necessarily know if it did happen.
So, Tony, what you're coming to is a vast universe of stuff, and you're carving out sort of your own little space in it. That seems like a potential nightmare as far as running into other things or what you making the kind of show you want to make inside of a universe that tends to have a very particular kind of story that it likes to tell. I'm just curious whether that was something that you worried about, or were you really kind of given your own space?
I never took a note on the show.
Not a single one. You never
I've
had
taken
to...
notes, economic notes. I've taken suggestions. I've certainly better dealed. I've lost actors and done all that kinds of stuff. And I'll change things all the time. If anybody has a better idea, I don't care if it's the nurse, I'll take it. So we do all that. But I never really know. But maybe the germane answer is, like, I tactically, and even before I had the whatever gravitas, to make the move, I always, really early on, I tried to show everything I was going to do up front. I never tried to hide anything from any producer, anybody. In fact, I was always terrified of people that said yes when they didn't know what I was doing. And the worst experiences I had in the movie business were always when when I hadn't followed that rule and people hadn't paid attention and they'd agreed to something, and I'd thought I'd explained it. And there have been some really bitter situations where I've literally spent 6 months going out of my way to make sure that the people knew what was doing, and I've done exactly what I said I was going to do, and they turn around and go, well, why did you give us what we asked for? It's that kind of shit. Mm-hmm. So I show everything. I don't consider my show an adaptation at all, zero. I have a treasure map, that I have to follow to the end. I have a canonical calendar. I have a 5-year period of Star Wars history that has a canonical calendar to it. And there are certain navigational points. There's certain navigational points I can avoid or cherry pick what I want. There are some that are very advantageous to me. There are some that are ripe for being perverted, and what we do a lot of is perverting things, and we've done some of that before. Oh, you thought this was the way it really was. It's something else. But I just, we told them up top it was just going to be completely, we were going to take it's easy to think of Star Wars as the Catholic Church, and Lucasfilm as the Vatican, and there's a Curia, and we basically said to them at the very beginning, we're taking the Latin Mass out of this, or we're not doing it at all. That's really what we're doing, and it's going to be completely different. If you want to do that, it's a good idea, and you should do it, and here's how we would do it. And but if you don't, we don't want to have anything to do with it. And then, man, I probably worked for 8 months for free, or 8 months for free without closing my deal, 8 months for free with tiptoeing in, but I want to show everything. I want you to know everything I'm going to do because I don't want to be unpleasantly surprised. So that's my vibe.
You have spent a long time working in film, some very impressive films. And I'm curious, what is different about writing for TV?
Well, man, I really, when I really realized I didn't realize at the beginning, I was incredibly naive and arrogant and humbled by what happened. And COVID really saved the show. It really, the volume and scale of the show really swamped us. and for a whole bunch of other. I mean, we have to. The simple fact is we have to design every fucking thing that we do. I mean, we can never write anything. Stage, bodega, library, sneaker, anything. All my writing starts with design. So, I mean, I can't even. My number one collaborator is a production designer, writing-wise. Seriously, I mean, the person I'm on the phone with most of the time is Lou Cole. So that's what we start with. That's this huge 40% that. What was the question?
Why is writing for television?
You know, when I realized what I was into, the opportunity just bit me in the ass. I was like, wow, I'm going to get 1,500 pages, free and clear to do whatever I want to do. And I can talk about revolution. I can talk about history. I can take all the political science and all the politics I want. I can package it however I want. I can hide behind it. I can camouflage it. I can duck behind all. I don't have to be contemporaneously pinned down to anything. I can do whatever I want. All these people. I have 1,500 pages, and in season 1 we had 200 characters, 200 speaking parts. I can have all the characters I wanted. I can write for all these British actors, and the opportunity just is keeping me going. You know, it's too much. It never stops. It's 3 years. I got 2 more years to go. It never stops. I won't stop writing until June. I've been writing for 5 years. But, like, I get to do War and Peace. I mean, I'm really, like, feel like I was a short story writer before, and now I'm a novelist. And I'll never do it again. I mean, I don't think I could do it on this scale ever again. I don't think I have the joie de vivre to do it again. It's too hard to do, but wow, what a fucking opportunity. It's been amazing. Yeah. And so that compels you. And I, the last thing I'll say, the coolest thing about it is, I wrote all day today. I wrote all day yesterday. I'll write all day tomorrow. Everything I write that comes off my desk in the end, and I'm writing finals now. I'm doing the scientific scripts, the final ones. I'm trying to final out. And when it comes off my desk, everything comes off my desk goes into an actor's mouth, and a great actor, and I know the great set. And man, you get in such great shape. You write 700 pages where everything that comes off your desk goes into somebody's mouth, man. I never wrote better. I never wrote clearer, faster, cooler. It still is hard, and it's just, it's still, you don't want to do it every day. But anyway, that's the difference. Movie writing's, the pain threshold is really short.
Okay.
That's what I should have said. That's what I meant to say. In the rewrite, that's what I said.
Yeah. No. I mean, so one of the things that I sort of heard you getting at, and I have heard from the rest of you also, is that TV is bigger, right? That there is just more space for all of the stuff that you want to fit in. In fact, it can be so big that, like, you don't even get to the melodrama that you were going to swear you did, that you have space to sort of pull out these characters, that you can fit in the editor's relationship with the... and I'm really curious about, like, the structural ways in your writing that you can sustain length. The reality is that the structure of a film is not the same as the structure of a TV season. And I'm curious about how you think about what a season arc is, what an episode arc is for your show. Madeleine, I was wondering, you were obsessively watching news radio, and there's sort of like a sitcom-y engine a little bit to Only Murders, but it has such a true crime and mystery vibe. How do you talk about what the shape of an episode and what the shape of a season is for your show? Yeah, I mean, it feels ridiculous to say in front of the creator of ANDOR, but we have so much trouble compressing. That's what we spend a lot of time trying to do. How in every 28 minutes can we, service the emotional arcs of these 3, but then 9 characters, plus advance the mystery, plus make sure we get in on all the gags, plus each episode has a thematic thing that we service. So, I mean, I think it's a mystery, so we start by breaking the mystery nominally. Sometimes we change it a little as we go along, and then and so we have broad strokes for the full season, and then we also have things we want these legendary comic geniuses to do, and we find places for that to happen over the course of the season. But I think we spend a lot of time we write sort of bigger and then try to get down into the most economical version of all of those things. For you, do you think of the episode as sort of the like building block, or is the season more the scale that you imagine people watching on?
Yeah, I mean, I think with a whodunit, which is in fact what Only Murders is, like the season is the unit, and then like, but then the episodes really matter, and we work hard to, obviously, I mean, I guess it goes without saying, we work hard to make them each satisfying as like a, beginning, middle, and end experience.
I don't know that it does go without saying. Is
Really?
The thing.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, because so much of the TV that I have seen, I think particularly in the last 5 to 7-ish years, it has felt like streaming has been pushing past or trying to overwrite sort of what an episode used to be. It's very interesting to me. It's like how people think about that as they're tackling just breaking story.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I ran this by my fellow writers in the room, and I got no traction, but maybe you guys will agree with me. Like, I feel like we're in a sort of like the Serial / Knives Out moment, because, we're in this experience, like we're in this geopolitical moment of constant perpetual emergency and like cascading apocalypse, and there's tremendous amounts of uncertainty, and there's this sort of, like people don't really understand we don't know how to understand our world necessarily anymore, and the rise of disinformation and the rise of conspiracy theory, like, coincides with the rise of cozy mystery. Like, it's all about the same thing. Like, people are like, I want to believe, like, we're living like at the mercy of like climate change or like global capital. There's no agent, there's no villain. How are we supposed to understand? There's evidence of this all around us, but how are we supposed to understand how this has happened? In a mystery, it's like, who did it? Oh, bad guy, you know what I mean? And then they go to jail, and then it's the end. It's very soothing, I think, narratively. So I feel like you can see why, I mean, to be clear, like in the room, it's like, should he fall on his tummy or his hiney? Like, we're not thinking that way, I don't think, in our room. But I do think that's what people want in terms of a cozy mystery, and we would not want to take that away from them.
Yeah, Taffy, man, I was thinking, you had a novel. It was structured that thing in a different way, and then you have to come in and be like, what is the shape of this as a TV show now? And it seems like the episode that you have, where you have one episode that suddenly flips the sort of narrative, when you have a different narrator, and seems like it is taking advantage of like what TV structure can do that is a little different than a novel chapter, but maybe not.
You mean the 6th episode where she's, okay. So a show that I neglected to say that I watched obsessively was Party of Five. And my producing partners, I believe, met on Party of Five. They were writer, producer for Party of Five. And I knew the story of FLEISHMAN. I knew the beginning, the middle, the end. And I had just come off of a book tour, and I knew what people liked about it. I knew what people remembered about it. I knew what the important parts were of it. But I had these producers who were very much, as a member of the media, I'm very much inside those conversations of, is this a movie cut up into 8 parts, or is this a TV show? And that distinction. And I'll say this, I talk with producers, and I have all these general meetings, and it's so interesting to me how in this landscape of so much streaming, there should be no rules. Like, we should be doing things that are 4 episodes. We should be doing a trilogy, like one movie a week for 3 weeks in a row. We could do anything, but people are still saying, is it a limited? Is it an ongoing? Like, they're using the same language, but maybe they're doing that, if I'm absolutely generous, because of the same rigors that my producers applied toward every episode having a theme and being memorable. Like, when we knew where the show was going always, but the question after an episode was written was always, why will I remember this episode? Can I say this is the one where he picked the kids up from camp? This is the one where he went through the stages of acceptance? Is this the one, the Big Rachel episode? Is this
the Friends titling episode conception of episodic theory?
And it really is. And as a result, I believe we got what we tried for which was that they were all distinct. And in the times where they weren't distinct, which I think we get into this like episode 4, 5, 6 region, where I worry they weren't distinct enough, we pulled out the things that made them flat. And I guess that's the thing I would say, is that like, if you can look at an episode and say, this is the episode where this thing happens, and this is why it was important, and these were the themes, and this was the beginning and the middle and the end. And it's interesting, this is the first time I'm doing this, and you submit these episodes for awards. Like I believe for this we submit one episode, or is it a whole series, or?
Well, I mean, so Julia is nominated for a specific episode, and I think so. There are some of the nominations are for specific episodes and some for whole series. I don't know how the submission works, actually.
I don't either. Does anyone here? You should know. Is it?
It's voted on by the entire guild, so.
Right, but did we submitted just the name of a show, not here's an episode? Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Everybody's voting on the entirety of the show.
Okay, well, thank you. But also, thank you. But also, like, the idea of these episodes, like, you see how important it is. And you see also, the mechanics of it is so different from a book. You see how important it is for an actor to see that they have an episode where, you know, things come alive. Claire, like, I'm a big Twitter person, and I tried to be less so, and Twitter melting down really helped with it. But it's starting the week that my show started, but there was a lot of like, what is Claire Danes doing in this show about flashbacks? And it was like, I hope Claire Danes doesn't see these tweets. But we always knew that episode, and she was confident enough to be okay with that, but she knew about episode 7, a little Disney friend there. She knew about episode 7 going in. So you have to also service all the people you're asking to be involved in this. But in terms of entertainment, every episode has to be a full meal, or else, I don't know, what are you doing, right?
There are episodic nominees here.
Right. Yes. So Julia was nominated for a specific.
What?
Yeah. Right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No. It's,
I really try to not think about awards because I don't ever win any, so I...
and yet you're
No,
sitting
thank
here
you,
right
thank
now.
you. Yeah, but I'm here now, and
Yeah.
that's important. Thank you. Thank you. Again, thank you.
Antonio, I was curious. One of my favorite and sort of most upsetting and I think most effective things is the way that the staircase loops through a couple different iterations of this terrible death, right? And the way that you're sort of not sure who the narrative I is in that moment, I found so fascinating. And the instability of whether the camera is some particular narrator or some omniscient. And I'm curious how you thought about how you would write those scenes, how you would shoot those scenes to create that. I mean, it is so effective and destabilizing, I think, as you're watching, to see different versions and feel so uncertain about it.
From the very beginning, what was interesting to me was the different theories. I mean, from the very beginning, what was interesting to me was that the story ended with you not knowing. And after all the years that I was involved, I started the process of working on this with confident that I would solve it. I was like, I'm going to spend all this time on this thing, and I'm going to figure it out. And I really thought I would. I didn't. And at some point I realized, oh, you know what? I just need to be okay with the not knowing. And that's an interesting place to end. And I knew that what was so fascinating was that the theories are all very compelling. And so from the beginning, when I thought of it as a series, I knew that I wanted to explore each. And we knew, and we talked about in the writer's room, Maggie Cohn, my co-showrunner, and I always talked about this sort of the staircase as this, one thing, we took liberties. It was a dramatization of of actual events, but the staircase itself, we wanted it to be the one thing that was exactly the way it was. And we measured the real staircase in the Peterson home, and we replicated that. And we meticulously replicated the patterns, the blood patterns and stuff, and we were interested in sort of like this space as something that is outside the show. It isn't what happened, it's what could have happened. And because of that, we wanted to shoot it in a way where we were a fly on the wall. We didn't want to editorialize, we didn't want to comment, we just wanted to watch it. And when we knew that was the case, we knew that then we had to shoot it in a way that was sort of objective and sort of there was a distance. And you just had to watch this thing over and over again. And it felt correct. It felt unpleasant and painful, but it felt like the correct way if you're going to try and explore that night and what happened in that staircase, that you have to do it in a way that was, not, one way that you could shoot that staircase scene was on every impact you would do a cut. And you get in the close-up and you see where the head hit the wall, and we were like, we're not going to do that. We're going to just let it play out the way that it might have played out. And the most interesting thing, for me, my experience of it was in episode 4, where you see the fight between Kathleen and Michael, where Michael, in the version where Michael kills her. I always, knew that we were going to do that and put that in the show, but I really was like, how are we going to make this believable? How are we going to believe that this fight could have unfolded, that she could have found this pornography and these escort sites and emails, and that could have escalated to a point where he kills her? And as we started to talk about it in the room and started to act it out, all of a sudden it started to be very compelling, and it, because I knew it in an abstract way, but then we started to live it, and then I watched it, and I was like, holy shit, this could have happened. And I hadn't felt that before, and I felt that on the day watching it, and I think that the reason why I also felt that was because we chose to shoot it in a way where we were just kind of there in the corner watching them have a fight. And I wasn't breaking it apart, I was just watching them have a fight. And I was like, holy shit, this actually could have happened like this. And he could have been so cornered that he lashed out in a moment, and everything kind of went the way it did. So, I still don't know what happened. And the show leaves you with the not knowing. But that was a revelation for me, that moment, living it out and seeing it. And I think that as an audience, that hopefully is that you have that experience watching each one of those, that there's like, holy shit, well, that could have happened. Oh, shit, the owl could have attacked her. Just about the owl, by the way. So we'll say this.
I was hoping you were going to get to
Because the owl, so the owl, we were rehearsing the scene with the owl outside the location in Atlanta.
Did you have a real owl?
Well, we shot owl elements, and we had to do the VFX owl. We couldn't train an owl.
Somebody with like some meat and
They're nocturnal.
Yeah. So we were rehearsing, and Toni Collette was about to rehearse a scene where she walks up to her car and she hears something in the trees, and she looks around, and then she ignores it because she notices something in this car in her driveway. And right before I called action in rehearsal, an owl swooped down and flew over her head, and then flew up back in the trees and disappeared. And what we found out when we talked to the owner of the house was that was a barred owl, and a barred owl is the owl that is supposedly the owl that attacked Kathleen. So I'm not saying anything except that happened, and that's really weird and spooky. I'm saying something.
Yeah,
I'm saying something. But yeah. But you watch. But we watch that, and you watch, a version of it, and you go, okay, well, maybe an owl can swoop down and think you're a deer.
I I'm not going to pretend that I can like segue from the owl back into like other kinds of TV in just a normal way, but but one thing that I was thinking as you were sort of describing the process of writing and discovery, you know, as you are watching it play out, is something that I've always been fascinated by, because I know that there is this way that you're writing a show and it exists somewhat in a vacuum, and it is in your head. And then as soon as someone is cast in a particular role, you are writing for that person doing that character. It is no longer sort of just this empty placeholder. And I'm really curious about how the writing can change once you know who that person is. I mean, it feels like casting Julia is so crucial for like how you are able to write that character. And I'm really curious if the way that you thought of the show, the way you thought of who she is, and your iteration of who she was going to be was able to change once you were able to cast her.
That's a really good question. You know, Julia was interesting because someone else was originally cast as Julia. And it would have been a sort of daffier, brighter version of Julia. And then that didn't work out. And then we found Sarah, who I think is one of the greats. And we got very, very lucky with her. Because Sarah is really funny and can do all the comedy that you have to do if you're playing Julia Child, but she also has gravity, and real weight. And we always wanted to show the sort of interior Julia. That was always part of the pilot that Sarah read. But Sarah, when she signed on, she sort of said, I know this is going to be marketed as a comedy, and I know there's a lot of humor in it, but I'm not thinking about it like it's a comedy. I'm just playing it like it's a drama. And I think the weight she gave it, you know, and the role of Paul was written for David, and then David was unavailable, and then someone else was cast as Paul. And then COVID happened, and then that person fell out, and we went back to David. It's a miracle that it ended up with Sarah and
several
David.
COVID miracles, apparently.
Yeah, and I just thought the way they played with each other brought out things that I think people haven't seen Sarah do before, and people haven't seen David do before, and I guess in the writers' room we were conscious of writing. We wrote 6 of the 8 episodes before we started filming. I mean, we had made the pilot. And then it was the last 2 episodes, episode 7, that Chris and I co-wrote the last 2 episodes. Chris created Party of 5, by the way. And and that was fun because we did know, like, for example, we knew that BB and David are so much fun together and they're
Right.
so playful together. So we wrote that whole runner in episode 7. So we started playing for them. Then with the second season, it was even more fun because all the writers came back, and it's a very small writers' room, and now we know what they can all do, and we love them all, and it was really fun. Like, let's give this to Fran. You know, he's so funny. Let's give him something really funny to do, and let's do this for Fiona. And then we started thinking about all the recurring players and who could come back and how we could bring them back. So, absolutely. Writing for the actors became one of the real joys of working on the show.
Yeah, the mention of recurring characters, I have a lot of sort of pet theories and things that I think are really distinctive to television as a form. But one of them is, I think, the way that minor characters have play in different spaces than they can in film. And I am so enamored of the minor characters in ANDOR. I think they are just these little miraculous gems that sort of pop up and have these whole worlds, and then, you know that they don't leave. You know the guy's still up there in the tower with his spells. Or Dr. Quadpaw, my other favorite.
Wow. Wow.
But I'm curious, like, how you think about minor characters can do such important world building, heavy lifting
Yeah.
And they can also just be so ornamental. And I'm curious how you sort of think about, not, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a like, this place feels fuller than it used to way.
I always had too many characters. I always had too many. And I always was ending up, you know, squeezing and cutting in movie business, you know, always down to 130 pages and always, you know, all the dictums of that limited real estate, and learned how to do that, but always trimming down. We got over there, and as I was building it, and then Nina Gold, who's the great casting, you know, she cast Game of Thrones and The Crown and everything else. I mean, she and Martin Ware, they have this just, you know, this dynasty of British casting. And we got there and we started seeing actors. And this was when I was going to direct, actually. And it'd be just pre-COVID. And actors started coming in, and they were so good. They were just so good. I started casting in the room off like, oh, yeah, you're in. And like, and then we started going. And then when it came time to start, you know, rewriting and going deeper, at a certain point I was like, Nina, are we ever going to run out of actors, you know? And they're just, I think it's, look, I agree with what was said before. I mean, every episode, every moment has to be vivid. Everything has to be vivid. That's my standard now. Everything has to be vivid. I don't want to see a scene that isn't vivid in some way. I'm not interested in it at all. And then I can tell that people don't care or whatever. Everything has to be vivid. So then everything has to be, you know, all these characters have to be alive. They're so much fun to write. These actors that we get are, and then we bring so many people in, and then, you know, we pick the ones we like, but then we make a repertory company of the ones we like that we didn't cast, you know? So we build a rep. I'm sure everybody does the same thing, right? You have this basket of all the people that you didn't cast for the other thing, but, oh, I really love her. And then you have this kind of like, oh, fuck, what about her for this? And, oh, that doesn't make sense. Well, let's do that. And you just, these actors, I mean, Genevieve O'Reilly, when I realized, I don't know, she had to come with the show. So she was in. I knew her from Rogue a little bit, but like, okay, I don't know what can she do? And you find out what she can do. You're like, oh man, this is a Steinway Grand, man. And you start to write up. And all of a sudden you realize you have all these people. I have actors like Anton Lesser, who plays Partagas, right? Who plays the head of the ISP. It was not a minor thing, but a guy in the beginning. That guy, you could give him, you know, 17 hectares of plot exposition, and it'll be like Shakespeare. And then you just, wow, I can put anything in his mouth. He's going to show up. He's going to know his lines. He's going to get it done. It's going to rock. I mean, you just start writing to it. You start writing to them. I don't know. They make you better. I don't know. I mean, you don't want to have. They're all like little shrines of opportunity, each one of them, you know? I mean, they're so much fun to do. I don't know. I mean, but that's the gas of it, right? Yeah. And that's the breadth of it that I'm talking about, you know?
Sure, it seems like it's also the TV of it, right? Because
I don't like the way I don't buy the basic theory.
Which basic theory?
I don't buy the theory. My attitude about it is that we're in a total free form right now. I don't think there's anything matters whatsoever. I don't think there's and I'm actually going to do some cliffhangers this year just to fuck with people to say, I know how to fucking do it if I want to do it. I'm going to do it. You want to see a space battle? We just space battle. You want this? We can do. You want to see it? We can do it as well as anybody. We'll do it. You want a cliffhanger? We'll do it. But I don't think it matters. I think what's happening right now, and it's not just happening on the screen or on the page or in this room, I think it's happening in business as well, which are all going to be at a meeting, you know, all the strike and everything. I think it's absolute and utter chaos right now. I think anything goes. I don't think there's any rules. I think it's so freaking exciting that it doesn't matter if 2 episodes, an episode and a half, 5 episodes, 6 episodes, this, that, a play, that it doesn't matter. I don't think there's any rules. Every time somebody tries to put a rule on the show, I always got annoyed. Like, why? Okay, I'm going to do what I want to do. And all I want you to do is turn the page. All I want you to do is come back. Please come back.
Sure, I think that was really the only thing I meant about the particularity of TV and casting, because once they're cast and the characters exist, you get to write for them again.
Oh yeah. No, I mean the arching,
Sure.
Trying to find a. I think if we look back in 10 years to try to figure out, oh, they were trying to figure out, you know, cubism or something. I mean, it's like we're in this other thing, and we should be happy that we're in how much better to be in this than to be in a box where, everything's got to be this way. And the agrarian system that TV used to work on, oh my God, the upfronts, and then there's this, and now we plant the crops, and now we till the fields, and all the actors are gone because they've all been harvested. It was fucking ridiculous, right? So we're free.
Wow, agrarian systems, I have to say.
No, did you ever live?
Let's see.
Was anybody old enough to be here when TV was really what TV was like? It was freaking horrifying. There'd be a thing, and you go like, if you were sort of into it from the outside, you go like, what do you mean all the actors are gone? Well, why don't you start your show in August? Well, nobody does that. My God, the Hunter's Moon won't be out. It really was weird.
I'm not.
We're out
arguing
of that.
with
We're free now. This
Yeah.
is the sexual revolution in television, you know?
Yeah, no, I far be it from me to suggest that the freedom is, a negative when a show like ANDOR can exist. When
Look at these weird shows that are all together on this stage. What a weirdo collection.
Hey,
There's not which one of these things doesn't go together? None of them.
And I think there is a way that so much of what has made all of these shows as good as they are is the ability to say this is what the format was, and so now we can break it, right?
Well,
And
you're good and you want to come back.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Audiences like being able to know something about what they're coming back for, but then the surprise of it is the other delight of the form for me. Yeah. Anyhow, I wanted to ask about flashbacks because I think I was curious how you decide when flashbacks are necessary and when they are sort of like, let's just go back and the timeline is jumbled. When is the point of telling a story in order? And when is it the right and necessary thing to be jumping backwards all the time? And yes, Taffy, I'm looking at you.
So looking at me, I know. I'm very lucky to have our assistant producer in this audience who made sense of our time, who spent a weekend and a 4-year college degree putting together a timeline of what FLEISHMAN was when I was just like, put it here, put it here, put it here. There are a lot of flashbacks in FLEISHMAN. And they are all predicated, if form and function follow each other, that in the aftermath of this man's divorce, he can't stop thinking about how he got here. So they were never just supposed to be explanatory. They were all there. Like the entire premise of episode 2 is that they're like invasive thoughts. And the scary thing was not when you decide them. It's why is he thinking of this right now? And also, how do you shoot them? And we had Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Ferris shooting our first block. And they were also executive producers on the show. And they put a lot of work into what they would look like, how they would have a different kind of color and a different kind of flair to them, and they would be a warm thing like a memory. But episode 2 is entirely invasive thought after invasive thought. If I don't know, is anyone else here like a neurotic that happens to? Yes, we all are. I'm in a room full of friends, right? So, and then his ex-wife drops the kids off, and everything we know about her is what he is either remembering or what he is remembering aloud to his friends. So we tried to be fairly rigorous. I hope it worked. But as the show goes on, he becomes freed from his flashbacks from episode, I think, 4 on. And then only in episode 7, when she has her episode, does she get it's not so much a flashback as a linear story of how she got here and what happened to her, which is all flashback until that moment. But that's how I experience time. I experience time as memory, and relationships are the sort of FLEISHMAN theory of relationships is that you are trying constantly to recreate the moment where you fell in love and figure out why everything since is this anomaly in a relationship that goes wrong.
So I want to keep talking to these people forever, but I think probably some of you also have questions that you would like to be able to ask them. I want to remind you of what we were reminded earlier, which is that they should be questions. I'm sure we all know that weird, uncomfortable feeling when somebody gets the mic and then they clearly start to do something that we're all like, but where is the question here? And I trust that that is not going to happen in this lovely,
Oh,
well-behaved.
that really warns him off.
Yeah.
I know.
I've never heard
I
that
dare
before.
you
I
to
like
ask
that.
a question now.
taking that.
Good luck. Good luck with your question.
Yeah, really. Who wants? Dare ya?
Which is not to say that I do not want, of course, your lovely questions, but just look, we've all been to some Comic-Con panels, and it's a dark time. So if you have questions, I believe there is a mic over here, and we can get them for you.
You just had a flashback while you were telling that.
Was it about a
See?
Comic-Con panel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when writing about things based on true events or real life, how much fictional liberty do you feel like you can take? Or that's just a question I'm always asking myself as I'm writing things based on true events, and I want to hear your point of view on that.
You should.
That sounds like an answer.
Yeah.
Sounds like me. Well, it's tricky. I mean, well, no. Here was my approach to it, and I think every story is different. We had a rigorous research process, and in the writers' room, we had a wonderful researcher named Michael Matthews, and he was like our staircase Surrey. He was just kind of quietly in the corner, and then we were like, "When does that?" And he'd be like, "Oh, well, that happened at this point," or there'd be situations where we were kind of going down a certain train of thought with a story beat or a character thing, and he'd be like, "Well, that's a little further away from the reality. Maybe if there was this thing that happened." And so what the guiding principle was, if we can point to something, if there is some basis for it, then we can include it or we can explore it. And we had every script was scrutinized by legal in our case. So if anything came up that was potentially problematic, they would tell us. And we only had one or two times when that happened because we were going into the process considering what actually happened. Now, you have to take creative liberties. This isn't a documentary, and we weren't making a documentary. It was a dramatization. So you have to imagine what happened in a room that only these two people were in, that nobody else was in, and you have nothing else to go on except sort of well, this is what they must have talked about. The basic rule was like, if you're not accusing them of something horrible, that you can usually include it.
Yeah.
And then when you're dealing with Michael Peterson, you can get weird. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it would be the importance and the emphasis of that answer is different if you're working in a true crime space than if you're working in. I mean, you've described Julia as a fable rather than as a sort of direct, biopic of her life. Yeah.
Correct. So there's a lot of content out there about Julia. I read, 5 or 6 books about her, including the ones that she worked on herself, but also the other ones. And anytime I came across something that I thought could be an episode, I wrote it down. So I have a list of just events that I thought could be dramatized. And we also had a researcher, and we also had legal scrutinize every script, and the Julia Child Foundation and the Smithsonian are consultants on the show. And everyone felt like we were true to the spirit of Julia. Russ Marash is a real person, so he couldn't become a drug addict. He couldn't cheat on his wife. They're just exactly what you're saying, the same rules of what we were and weren't allowed to do. But for example, there's an episode where Julia goes to San Francisco and goes to a drag bar. So I was fascinated by Julia's relationship with James Beard. I read the new biography of James Beard. I thought that was a really interesting thing to dramatize. In the research, we read that as soon as the French Chef started airing in San Francisco, drag performers were doing Julia and the show, and she immediately appealed to the counterculture in San Francisco. We knew that James Beard's favorite city was San Francisco. We wanted to do a James Beard episode. So what we did was we had James Beard take Julia to a drag bar where she would see a Julia Child impersonator.
If you have
That's
not
what
seen
we
this
made
episode,
up.
it's very fun.
So it's all based on real research. And then we were fascinated with Julia's relationship. She had a complicated relationship with gay rights, and people have talked about some of her homophobia, but at the same time, James Beard was her best friend. And we found those contradictions in Julia really interesting, and we felt we could dramatize that in this episode. So everything we did was based on fact and research, but the event that she goes to San Francisco for a book signing and goes to this drag bar, that we made up. And that the foundation, legal, everyone felt we were being true to Julia, and we didn't have any problems.
That's okay.
Hi. My question is kind of dark, but we talked a lot tonight about, or you all talked a lot about how nothing matters and how like the structures of things have kind of blown up, and you said it was freeing for that to happen, but I just am finding it, I'm wondering what you think about contributing to creative arts while things kind of feel like they're not mattering as much, like just nothing mattering. Not like,
You mean
and that was the
creating
bad
in a
version.
nihilistic world? Is that what your question? That's a.
Serious.
I mean, I don't.
All right, let's hear it.
No, I mean,
I asked that question.
you know,
terribly.
I'll package it in something that, and I don't know if it'll be a popular answer, but when I went out to sell the show, and because the show has all this politics in it, and everybody tries to pin you down, oh, what are you trying to say, right? You're trying to make this. And what I found myself saying was that, what I found myself believing, and I think it tangents into what you're saying, is there's an arrogance that we have. You have an arrogance, I have an arrogance. We think that we live in the most, the most extreme, the most vivid, the most painful, the most excruciating, the most decisive moment in history. That is just absolute, ego arrogance of a being on a planet in a moment. You don't matter any more than all the people who went through all the trials and tribulations of all the other things that happened. People need to make shit. People need to be distracted. People don't care. I mean, all the shit that happens, what do people talk about? If you listen to people on the street, oh, what'd you watch? What'd you watch? What show are you watching? What are you going on? What show? I mean, people aren't going to stop making things because extreme things and dangerous things are happening around them. Sometimes they make better things. Sometimes things get squashed. But I think it's a continuum. I think you're looking at it. I think you're looking at it a little bit from youth and a little bit from the naivete of the moment of our society. And I suffered the same thing. I thought, oh my God, look what we're going through. And I go, what am I doing? If I'm in Greece in 600 AD, I'm worried about, my concerns are just as vivid and controlling. So I'm not sure it's, I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, things have always not mattered.
Yeah, man, a frame is good. A frame.
What if it all
but they have
matters, though?
But a frame is good. A frame is good. You got to have a frame. If the limitations are really good for creativity. If someone comes along and says, oh, everything has to be inside this box, and everybody here has to go to work the next day, that's a really good problem. Everyone's going to work inside this box. It's very helpful. It starts the day off really good. I know what it is. Okay, I'm in here. What's in here? Right? You're in it. It's terrifying to have no limits. Right now, everything is free and unlimited, and people are freaking out because oh my God. So it's good. It's a good time to be making things right now. I don't know. I don't know if there's ever been a bad time to make things, except when you can't get protein or antibiotics or, seriously.
And the non-political, like the other response, the flip side of the question is now something doesn't have to be a comedy. It doesn't have to be a drama. It can be both. And then they can decide how to sell it. It can be 45 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour. It doesn't have to be 23 minutes. The episodes don't all have to be the same length. You can do a long one. You can do a short one. So there's a lot of, I think, exciting creative freedom in the way, at least, I grew up when there were 4 channels and there were multi-camera comedies and they were they had commercial breaks and there were hour-long procedurals, and now TV has exploded, and it's wild to try and actually, I think, to untrain your brain to think in the pattern that you grew up with and say, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be a half hour. It doesn't have to be, it can be more than one thing at once. And I think that the no rules aspect of that is very freeing and exciting.
I want to add one thing on piggyback on that. The one thing that is really different, that is like the big game changer in my life, and I saw it. You do not have. No one's ever going to say your lead character isn't sympathetic. I mean, I spent half my life. Oh, I don't like this guy. Oh, it's not sympathetic. I don't like her. That doesn't matter one single bit anymore. Am I fascinated by this person? Is the only question anybody asks. Tony Soprano changed that. A couple people changed that. But that's a seismic. That's like relativity changing or something. That's a real game changer. You're all liberated from that. You don't have to have. Oh my God. I don't like him.
I don't think that women are liberated from that.
I was going to say.
In what way? That women can be unlikable?
Towards female characters as to whether or not they're likable.
I totally disagree. If only characters are fascinating, that a character that's fascinating, people will follow. I mean, did you watch Martha Mitchell? Did you see Julia Roberts do Martha Mitchell? I mean, she was fascinating.
I think
sympathetic? No.
There are certainly spaces where, and like genres, where there is room for that. But the fact that Martha Mitchell was a real person gave that character.
I don't know.
A lot of
I'm just picking that
liberty
because that's the first thing that came to mind. But I don't see any delineation at all in that. I really think people are it has to be compelling. We have so many vivid characters now that you wouldn't have before. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I would like to say that I don't know who said nothing matters. That's a very extreme way of interpreting. Look at all these, there's no rules anymore, but you're still beholden to the rules of storytelling. You're still beholden. It actually clarifies a lot when you're still beholden to a fascinating character, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Like, there's still plenty of rules. Don't worry. You'll be fine. Okay, it all matters. How about that? Look at it that way. It all matters.
I think that, at the end of the day, the most important thing, and the thing that I've always followed, is just put my head down and I try not to listen to all the noise. And what story do I want to tell? Who do I care about? And I see where that takes me. And I just stay true to that. And I try not, I feel very out of touch a lot of times with what is popular and what isn't. I don't watch a lot, but I end up watching something and it inspires me, and that's cool. And I'll watch old movies. I tend to watch a lot of old movies. And again, I think it's really important to just, be aware of the world around you. But when it comes time to you writing something, put your head down and just focus on that and think about the story you want to tell and try and tell that, and hopefully someone give you the chance. And if someone doesn't give you the chance, make it yourself. And then, hopefully somebody listens. But, at least you got to just keep trying. And I think that is true. That's always been true, and I think that always will be true. Just focus on the story you want to tell and the things you care about. That's all that you can do, and that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Candace Bushnell is allowed to think that women. Candace Bushnell is allowed to think that people are hard on women, though.
Okay.
Yes.
That's almost a positive way to wrap it up. We don't need the next other question.
Yes.
Notice that Tony over there is very open to the idea of how much freedom there is in the form, and I hear that from Daniel as well, and then I heard from Madeleine and Taffy about some of the restrictions, about trying to make each episode memorable or trying to fit it into a certain format and trying to fit things into a time frame. I'm wondering, technical question, is the length of each episode and the number of episodes that you're proposing, is that from the pitch? Are you bringing that to the, or is that something that's brought by the parent company, the streamer, the network? Is that, you understand, like the number of, like,
Go first.
because sometimes you see a show that in the first season it may have 7 episodes and the second season it may have 9 episodes. So I'm wondering, is that something that's structured from the beginning, or is that something that comes about as you're working on it? Are you confining yourself to how many episodes and where each episode ends? How do you know how you're going to fit each thing?
Madeleine?
How are you going to structure it after it's done?
I believe that Only Murders came with an order, and it was a number of episodes that was preset for us. I think in my limited experience, limited series, sometimes you can kind of do a little bit more wheeling and dealing, depending on how the break goes, and maybe you can make it a little bit bigger, a little bit shorter. That's all I know about my particular show.
We had a series order, and it came along with a pitch document that I wrote, or a series document it's called. I guess it's also called a Bible sometimes. And I had 9 episodes sketched out. We ended up doing 8 after the episode 7 table read. I felt like, and my partners agreed with me, that we could not sustain 2 episodes without, that was the sort of climax of the show. And then we were told that it should, this is an hour-long drama, but a couple of episodes go over an hour, and a couple of episodes are 44 minutes. And I guess I don't think I think we all were under the same, like, there is no difference between what we were told. I eliminated an episode. Along the way, I wanted to do a musical episode. I know it sounds great. Thank you for your support. And FX, I think, euthanized that idea pretty quickly, but very kindly. And so it was always a living thing. It's a very much alive thing. But I think that I do think that for foreign sales, they ask that you stick to some kind of format. But I think that if you're like, I'm done after 8 episodes, but then there are a lot of people who are paid by the episode, and they're like, but what about that extra episode? Like, you don't know, but you try to make your best show.
With Julia, also, when they bought the show, there was no discussion about actually how many episodes it was. And then when we made the pilot, to get a pickup, they asked me to write a Bible. Mm-hmm. And I wrote a 10-episode Bible that included 2 episodes that took place in France, which is something that pre-COVID, HBO Max was really excited about. They wanted. So we put those 2 France episodes, but then we made the pilot pre-vaccine. It was a really crazy time. And so they gave us the pickup, but they gave us an 8-episode pickup. And they said, if you get a second season, you can start the second season in France, which is what we did. So we did get to go to France, but now we are an 8-episode show. And
really, forever?
I think we are, which I think it's also what our cast wants. Like, I don't think, I know you do get paid by the episode, but I think our cast also likes having half the year off. And
there is some kind of metric where it's not worth making it unless you get enough stuff out of it.
And something
like
that they also...
But that's not our purview. We're fighting for the show, and the network's like, how do we make this work?
And the network also is looking for people. They're looking to see that people finish it. They're not. Yeah. They're looking that you watch all of it.
And they know every minute.
That's
they
right.
know when you looked away, and they'll let you know.
They know you're here
They'll know. They'll know where your eyes were. They'll know where you paused. They know everything.
Did you get those metrics? Did they share this with you?
Nobody's seen that.
No.
Oh, you have. Oh my God.
I haven't seen. I wish I could see.
I'm a journalist, and I have other sources.
Yeah, what I have heard is that if they show you the metrics, the graphs have no labels on them, which I think is pretty fun.
I mean, when I made a movie at Netflix, they tell you after the first 10 days, how many people after the first 21 days, 30 days. And then I heard on the TV side, they don't tell you anything. And I think it's partially because it's probably harder to understand those numbers in a way, right?
It's not that hard.
No, I don't
It's
know
not that hard.
That's
My
what they-
husband
that's what
is
they
a
say.
former variety reporter and is well sourced, and I find out the numbers
Oh, you
without
do?
the network.
Really?
Yes, and if you would like to know
I
yours,
would like to know mine.
right, Claude? We'll find out. Claude and I are going to
Did
find
you,
out. for you.
just in terms of this length, which I think speaks to sort of the exciting time they're in, where it seems like things are I love, and it's like if you told an author, okay, well, every chapter you write has to be 10 pages, they'd be like, well, okay, and then, but it's great that there's not this set rule and that the target moves. When we started with Staircase there, it was like, it's 58 minutes. And we were like, okay, well, let us just write the episodes the length that they are, and like let us make the episodes, and then at the end of it, we'll have a conversation based on like what you see, and then, and very much to HBO Max's credit, they watched the episode and they called me and they were like, you know what, you were right. Like the episodes should be the length that they are. Maybe it could be a few minutes shorter, but like, but we're gonna give you that. And I don't know if maybe were they like that at all with you guys in terms of how long an episode should be?
They definitely felt, again, because of the low stakes of the show and that the show doesn't have any cliffhangers at the end of any of the episodes, that they thought like the sweet spot was 45 minutes. I think contractually they had to be under 52 minutes. And our goal was we usually hit around 45 minutes. We have a couple that are 48, 49 minutes. We have a couple that are 42 minutes. But our scripts in the first season were all like 55 to 60 pages, and then it was like, how do we get this down to 45 minutes? And then it was sort of easy, which was also kind of depressing. And then, but this season we wrote shorter scripts, and we got an extra day per episode to shoot them, so it was more manageable. And they were like around 53, 54 pages. So they always like, we would have things in our back pocket. So we would be like, let's leave this in, even though we know we could cut it, because they're going to ask to get one more minute out, and we can take, so you have to sort of play that.
That's a really important point, though, that they give you a certain amount of days per episode. Yeah. So if you've written too many pages, you're burdening your crew. Like, you're responsible for your crew in most cases. So we had the same thing. We had the same thing that you had with our big 7th episode. It went over, which we weren't necessarily allowed to your point. But then we gave it to them. We said, what would you cut? And they were like, okay. She gives a good performance in that episode.
Other questions?
Hi, yes. So this question can be for anybody. In the spirit of authorial intent, it's always interesting to see how the audience views the content you put out. Has there been any interesting situations where the audience reaction was so against what your authorial intent was that you felt scrambled to change something in a future episode or season to adjust that expectation?
We shot the whole thing before anyone saw it. The press saw all episodes, so no, we couldn't do that. I don't know. I try not to think about that.
I mean, it's really sort of like a network context, I think, and there's so few shows that are existing like contemporaneous to,
There's a couple things I heard after we came out. There's a couple things I want to like. People said I want to like, just have my way with them this time around.
Sure.
Just toy with that idea for a moment. There's a couple things that I saw along the way, but nothing like, I don't think anything that's like exactly to what you're saying. No, because most of the shows are made before they're. we made our show for 3 years, like under a blanket. We actually, and we can't even do focus screenings or anything. We can't do anything. So it's all secretive in this really tiny community for 3 years, and we make it. And when we finally started to show it, we were like, oh my God, people can actually, and then we had 12 hours of it, and it's very, so I don't know, we were more in shock by having an audience than what they were saying in the beginning.
All right, I think this is our last question.
Okay, this is a question about executives, and you guys have, I think, touched on this, but it's really about notes that you get from executives. Do you guys still get notes? I think I know Tony's answer. He's like, I don't listen to them. I don't care.
I don't want to be that guy.
But
I don't want to be that guy anymore.
But do you guys, do you still get them for every episode? And what do you do when you get the note that's like, note 1A from the playbook, or, a bad note? How do you deal with the notes? Do you do what they say, or what do you do?
My approach is to engage with every note. I engage with every note.
I agree.
And what I do is I literally write an essay back to every set of notes so that they know that because I think that basically my relationship with executives is not, I don't have a contentious relationship with them. I respect them. I find so many of them to be incredibly smart and have good ideas. And sometimes their ideas and their perspective is one that I don't have because I don't watch a lot of TV and I don't have a certain kind of, they think in a certain way, and I think that's great. So what I do is I engage in every note, and if there's a note that I don't agree with, I'm very honest about not agreeing with it, and I write out why. And I sometimes sort of play a game of attrition, just like I'll just keep, you know what? Hold on, let me try another version of that, and then I'll do that, and I'll just keep going, and then eventually, if it really doesn't matter, it goes away. But I think the most important thing is that you're. For me, it's always been like I don't want it to be like, I didn't do that note because I thought it was stupid. It's like I didn't do that note because of this reason, and I actually looked at the timeline and I tried that, or I did try that, or I did try what you thought or your idea, but and I'm not. We didn't do that version of it, but that led to this even better idea, and so. And I find that if you kind of like send back an essay every time.
Dude, I so agree with you. I can't. I think that's like maybe the most important thing here tonight is that of all the writing that I do on the show, I don't know if it's true for anybody else, but like, and even when I die and they go through all my writing, I've done so much more writing of memos and essays and manifestos and explanations and pleadings, and it's not just executives. Executives are a small part of the note structure. You have actors, you have money, you have all the different things. And I literally, man, if you want to be a screenwriter, it's not enough to write dialogue and write scenes. You have to really, in the end, if you're really going to push it all the way out and get up here and do this, I think you got to really be able to communicate and politically, ambassadorially, protocol-y deal with everything. And he's absolutely right. I mean, everything that comes in, you get right to it right away. You know what? We tried that. It's a legal brief. And I had an actor once refuse to do a final scene on a big movie. And it was like, what the? And I remember going into the whole weekend on a letter, and it's like,
just movie.
No, every single thing that he or she could possibly say. It's like, and I look back at this absolutely mad, manic, paranoid fucking manifesto, totally overcompensating for this thing. But like, they were like, oh, sure, dude, I'll do it. No problem, man.
That's the thing is I find
okay, if you feel that way about it.
The passion comes through. If you write
really
back,
thought about that idea. But man, you have to do so much side writing.
Yeah.
I have more memos in literally, most of my time is spent side writing.
I feel like their notes are sometimes really good, and they have a lot of experience doing this, and they're paying for it. And so you try it, or you say, or you understand that what they might be saying is that this thing isn't working for them. Susanna Grant taught me a thing. It's not the beat, but the beat before. Like very often, everyone knows that? Okay. Sometimes you get a note on something, but it's not about that. It's about, they're reading it once or twice, and you're living with it. And I find that if you engage respectfully with all of it, they engage respectfully with you, I hope. So far, that's been my experience.
That's been our experience on Julia. Also at the beginning of the season, you pitch the whole season out, and so they know what they're getting. There aren't any big surprises along the way, and then the little notes usually come with the cuts, or at least in our case, that's when we get the sort of micro notes, and that's exactly right. And Chris writes the most beautiful and taught me how to write the most beautiful, and now we write these beautiful paragraphs for each note, and a lot of the notes are good. Some of the notes are kind of 6 of one, half dozen of another. Like you can sub out a performance read for one line, and it really makes no difference. Like there's ways to just. So when you do come up against a note that you want to really fight for a beat or fight for a moment, it's exactly what you're saying. If you just write passionately, we tried it. This is why we want to keep it. Sometimes we'll even send them 2 versions. We'll say, here's your version, but this is what we want to do. And they always end up letting us do our version. So there's
a 2-version thing. I think at first I was scared of it because I was like, oh no, they're going to see the thing that they like, and then they're going to. But if you just go, no, this is how confident I am in it. We did it, and this is. I think that's a really great approach too.
I want to thank everyone here so much. This has been an incredible panel. I cannot tell you how much fun I have had. I hope that it has been the same for all of you here. And I want to ask you to please thank our incredible panelists.